I'm Nicole Gillis, and I'm a political science major at the University of Tampa. And today I have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, Mrs. Mercedes Schlapp. Mercedes worked in the White House for 2 different presidential administrations in senior level positions. In 2017, Mercedes was assistant to the president and senior advisor for strategic communications, where she advised on messaging and served as one of the top communicators. She also developed and executed communication policy rollouts in coordination with the White House and the cabinet. During President George W. Bush's term, she worked as the director of specialty media in the White House, where she was a spokeswoman and created communication strategies to reach out to Americans of all backgrounds. Mercedes also has extensive experience and insight into presidential campaigns. In 2020, she was senior advisor for strategic communications for the Trump-Pence campaign. She was the architect for building a successful Hispanic communications and political outreach campaign in both English and Spanish, which significantly helped to produce historic Hispanic support for the president. She also created and produced the Team Trump online programs that reached over 3 million viewers nightly. She also hosted The Right View, a weekly online talk show that focused on policies impacting American women. She traveled across America on the campaign trail, where she listened to the stories of everyday Americans, participated in local media interviews, and worked with the grassroots to expand the voter base. Her experiences on the campaign trail date back to 2000, when she worked in communications for the Bush-Cheney campaign and the Republican National Committee. Before she joined the White House in 2017, Mercedes was a contributor on Fox News, and she still frequently appears on Fox News, Fox Business, Univision, Telemundo, CNN en Español, and other networks. She is also interviewed on local and national Spanish and English radio. Mercedes has had numerous op-eds published in FoxNews.com and The Hill, and was a columnist for the Washington Times and U.S. News and World Report. She also hosted a weekly radio show on SiriusXM for several years alongside her husband, Matt. Mercedes is originally from Miami, Florida, and attended Florida International University, and went on to earn her master's degree from George Washington University in public administration. Currently, Mercedes and Matt live in the DC metropolitan area with their 5 daughters, while she works as a senior fellow at the CPAC Foundation and regularly hosts the online show America UnCanceled on CPAC Now. She also serves on the board for both Moms for America and Bienvenidos. Mercedes is a first-generation Cuban American whose father fought against the Castro dictatorship and was a political prisoner for 6 years. Her father's story has played a major role in her life and has led her to dedicate her life to promoting civil discourse, fighting against socialism, and defending freedom in the United States and across the globe. Today, she will be discussing Cuba and communism versus freedom. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Mercedes Schlapp.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, ladies. How are y'all doing today? This is so exciting. I feel like I'm hanging out with all my girls. This is great. So they did ask me about the speech title. And first of all, I want to say thank you to Lindsay for getting us organized, and obviously for this incredible team here that you all have. And obviously, Michelle Easton is such a hero of ours, and her book, How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. Luckily, you don't even have to give that to your mother, because your parents did a good job. Okay, so find the liberal friend and then give it to that mother, okay? So, but it's truly an honor to be here. They asked me about the speech title, which is interesting that they said Cuba and the impact here in America about socialism. But I also, before I go into that conversation, I wanted my speech title to be Courage My Daughters. Encourage My Daughters is, as I was going through all these speech topics, it really came to me when I was praying and saying, well, what is the message I want to deliver to you all? And it's a message that comes from a saint called Saint Teresa of Avila, and I'm Catholic, and she was writing this beautiful book called Interior Castles. And one of the things you learn when you come to Washington, because you get so excited. I was just talking to Helen, who works on our CPAC team. She just graduated. Helen, say hi. She just graduated from Hope College in Michigan. And one of the things that we were talking about is you get over here and you're so excited. You're like, oh my goodness, DC, it's so great. And you're taking selfies and you're at the Capitol and all this stuff. But then you realize, do they ever get anything done here, these people? Can I really make a difference? And then you're like, oh, and then there's fake news. And goodness, they really hate conservatives. And not only do they hate conservatives, they hate conservative women the most. So you start going through all this and you're like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I being called to do what I am doing right now? And so the courage, my daughters, comes from this importance of, it starts with filling your vessel. It is about filling your spiritual vessel. It is about starting with prayer every single day so that you are planted firmly every single day in what you're doing. Because what do we need to know? That we got to do not what our will is, but what God's will is. And every morning has to be, what do I do for the glory of God? And that should be the first question you ask yourself every single day if you want to survive the DC swamp. And people lose sight of that because, of course, you go out and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm at this place and I met this guy. And of course, the question is, what do you do? Where do you work? I mean, that is the biggest DC question you'll ever find. And that's not what's important. It's who you are and why God has put you on this earth. And listening to him is more important than anything else you can imagine. And when you're in this town that is so kind of crazy and chaotic, because it is, and I'll tell you, I've been here, I know Nicole read that bio, you know, I'm only 28. Gosh, it's so amazing. No, I'm not. But you know, I came as a young woman. I did my graduate degree here, and then I worked on a presidential campaign for George W. Bush. I met my husband at the White House, and we've been married for 21 years. And I came in, and I was like you all, really ready to take on the world, and this is great. And I remember people ask me, they're like, so are you gonna get married? And I, like, my family's Cuban, so you're supposed to be married by 21, and all my friends are getting married, and I'm in DC, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna get married, and I'm not gonna have kids, and I'm a career woman, and I'm gonna change the world. This is what I'm gonna do. So I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do, and God said, no. So when I go work at the White House and I have my dream job, I meet my husband. And it was on September 11th that we were both at the White House. I don't even think you guys were probably even born at that time. And the planes crash into New York, and then they go and hit, and we get news that there's a plane coming to the White House. So we have Secret Service running down the hallway on the old executive office building. And they're saying, you gotta get out, the plane is coming. So we run out, we have no idea what's happening. It is, you're just so stressed out. And then we had only been dating a month. And his sister calls him and says, Matt, do you know where Mercy is? And Matt's like, I can't find her. And she goes, you find her, you tell her you love her, and you tell her you're gonna marry her. So we got engaged by December on our feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe and got married the following July. Why? Because you realize when it's a life or death situation, life is too short. And we have been partners through it all. From we work together, we obviously have 5 girls together. We've seen the ugliest side of this city, and we've seen incredible moments in the city as well. But what keeps us together is God and that foundation and our faith. Because everything else here, silly. Very, very silly. The power goes away, the fancy parties go away, but what lasts are your relationships, your community that you build here in this area, if this is where God intends you to be. So it's about filling your vessel, making sure you're serving God's purpose, and making sure, and it's funny because I had thought about this and then it left me and then it came back to me again. You don't hang out with anyone who's weak in spirit. Not one person. If they are weak in spirit, get them away from you. Because they do not have your best interest. They don't love you. It is important to get rid of those people. Negative energy, toxic energy, people that are just about themselves. Very, very important to make sure that stay away from the weak in spirit people. Because in this city, power's constantly shifting, and you have to stay planted firmly. And as Ephesians 6:11, put on your full armor of God. As conservative women, we are the ones on the front lines, protecting our children, protecting the next generation, protecting our families, protecting our communities, and protecting our faith. Think about that. That's incredible. So then you ask, well, how did you get here? Or maybe you don't want to ask that, but you ask, how do you get here? Well, you get here by, I was very much inspired by my dad. So my dad was a successful businessman in Cuba back in the late 60s. And the communist government comes and takes over. And of course, this is what happened. People don't realize you can lose a country in just a matter of decades. You see this with Venezuela, you see this in all these countries. And in Cuba, Fidel Castro came in, the militants were there, and they basically took away my dad's businesses. And my dad had a choice. You could either fight or you could either stand down. And my father chose to fight. He joined the counter-revolutionary group. They were looking to overturn the government. And let me get this straight. My dad's Cuban and he's 5'5", okay, super short. Which my girls are all super short too, considering my husband's 6 feet tall, and then my girls are always like, why are we so short? And I was like, well, it's the Cubans' fault, So my dad then, at that point, gets caught. And so there's a mole in the group. Again, someone who is weak in spirit, someone who has no loyalty. They turn in these men. They execute half of his group. And the style of execution is they put you against a wall, blindfolded, and they literally just shoot you. And my dad ends up in solitary confinement for about 3 months at a time. And then he makes a promise to Our Lady of Mercedes, which is a patron in Cuba, one of the patron, I would say, virgins of the political prisoners. And he said, if I get out safely, I will name my first daughter Mercedes and always have a statue of Our Lady in my house. And so that's where I get my name. So then, growing up around the kitchen table, these conversations, when we didn't have cell phones back then, or when we had cell phones, there were these big clunky things. You should go find them at the Smithsonian Museum. My dad talked about the horrors of communism. And all he kept saying to me was, freedoms are fragile. And your job is to defend these freedoms. And that has always stuck with me. And then I knew very much that I was called to public service. I was called to stand up for freedom. I was called to fight, stand up, and not back down. But you can't do this by yourself. You need to put the full armor of God. You have to make sure that God is in the center of it. You need to make sure that you're praying about it so that you're given the strength and the courage to speak up. So when I came to DC, I worked in the George W. Bush White House, and then met my husband there, as I mentioned. And then we get married, and then my husband was really, he's so funny. He's German Irish, so he's oh, we'll never have kids, And I seriously was I'm fine, I don't, but we then start having these beautiful girls, 5 girls later. I remember with my first girl, I had to leave the White House, and my neighbor shows up, and I'm holding the baby. She's, and I'm crying. I hadn't showered. It's kind of crazy. This idea that you're perfectly put together in the first 6 weeks, it's a joke. It's not true, okay? And then the neighbor comes, she goes, what's wrong? And I was well, I used to be a presidential spokesperson, and now I'm a spokesperson for a baby and a black cat. And I start crying. And so, you're my career's over. How can I do this? I have this baby, I have this black cat, my husband's working 24/7, I never see him, I'm a single mom. So I'm in chaos, distress. Well, needless to say, I say, I'm gonna put my career to the side. My husband ended up working full time, and I worked from home a little bit, but I stayed and raised the kids for quite some time. Then baby number 2 and 3 come. When baby number 3 comes, I don't even remember that poor child. I feel so bad for Alyssa, because if she asked me how she was as a baby, I'm I have no idea, because I don't think I slept at all during that time. And then baby number 4, and then baby number 5, baby Lucia. But when baby Lucia came around, as I started having these kids, I started getting more involved on the media front and started doing commentary on television, which I really enjoyed. Pretty much always pregnant. I think I would show up to Sean Hannity's show. He's what number is this? And, but I got to tell you, looking back, as I got to Lucia, I get called from Ivanka Trump. And Ivanka calls me, and, Ivanka's a remarkable lady. And she's hi, Mercy, can you come work at the White House for my father? And you can't say no to Ivanka at that point. You're like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm going to drop everything and go work for the White House. But I did. I talked to my husband, and here you go, right? Remember, I sacrificed, stayed home with the kids. Not that it was a sacrifice, it was the biggest blessing of my life. And then all of a sudden, I looked at my husband like, they're asking me to go into the White House to help organize the communication shop with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And my husband was like, I support you 100%. He's like, we'll get it done. Don't worry about it. We will, the girls will be fine. You're going to do this. And so what do you find? That if your vocation is for marriage, and not everyone gets married, okay, there's different vocations in life, that you want to make sure that the person you're with supports you 100%, and you also have to support him 100%. It goes both ways. And so I go into the White House. Really, it was one of the toughest jobs, but Donald Trump was the best boss ever. He listened to the women all the time. We were in his ear. We would give him advice. We couldn't handle some of his tweets because he would tweet at 2 o'clock in the morning. But he was so respectful with the women. We would be in the Oval Office. You would have 2 cabinet members, and then he'd look to find you on the sofa, and I'd be like, please don't call me, please don't call me. And then you'll call, well, Mercedes, what do you think about this, and this? And then by the end, he'd be like, Mercedes was right, we're gonna go in this direction in terms of policy. And you felt so empowered in that White House. And we had, I think, between Kellyanne, Ivanka, myself, Brooke Rollins, who ran the Domestic Policy Council, Sarah Huckabee, we had about 12 kids between all of us. And it was crazy, okay? It was like, okay, who's got which kid is lost, we gotta find that. It was crazy. But what were we? We had such an important voice in that White House because we were able to talk not only from a woman perspective, but from a mom perspective, from a daughter perspective, from a sister perspective on what women were thinking and how we needed to work on these issues to help improve the lives of women in America, and obviously in my space, Hispanics in America as well, which we made inroads with the Trump campaign as well. So I tell you all this to give you just some, I would say, some wisdom that when they say you can do it all, you can do it all. And you can do it all, but you need God in the center to do it all, and making sure that you're listening to God as you're going through your process. And, having children, I think, is the greatest gift in my life. My daughter now is 20 years old. She's just flying back from North Dakota, and she just worked at a maternity center with teenage moms from the Native American reservations. And it's just been an incredible experience for her to learn how to deal with little babies that, their moms might be in jail, and helping to raise those babies, and also helping to guide these young women. Because guess what? The solutions don't come from Washington. The solutions come from communities, and they come from our homes. And my advice to you is find your community. That is critical. When you're feeling alone, when you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going through my reels. I don't know why you guys, I feel so bad for you guys that you have to watch those reels, although some of them are super funny. But like, you're going through it and you're like, oh, so-and-so, look at her, she's so great, or whatever. No, turn it off. Look at the world that God's given you. Look at the opportunities He's given you. And then be a voice for the voiceless. Be a voice for the voiceless. So I'll tell you my experience with my husband when we went to CPAC Mexico last year. We visited safe homes where there was victims of sexual trafficking. Little girls starting at 9 years old to about 18. Drug cartels would take them. They would get raped constantly. So we got to visit with these girls, and they loved God, and they were being taught and getting the education, and many of them, the success stories are amazing. They end up going to the university, they end up having these careers, and they're amazing women. And we also got to meet with some of the boys that also were sex trafficked in their area as well. So we felt very called by God to start the CPAC Center for Combating Human Trafficking. We launched it when we did our movie premiere with Sound of Freedom, which if you haven't watched, how many of you watched Sound of Freedom already? Okay, go watch Sound of Freedom. Just go watch it. So as a mother of 5 girls, being able to see other girls that have suffered so much, and knowing that God has given us all these incredible talents, we said we got to start something, we got to make it big. So now our CPAC Center is working, Helen's part of that as well, working to go on Congress, develop tough laws against these human traffickers, find resources for the human trafficking victims, and and for us, we don't view it as political, we view it as humanity. And as Eduardo Verástegui always says, God's children are not for sale. And that is where, at least for me, where I have found God has called us to move towards in our lives, to start the center. And really, we did it successfully with criminal justice reform because we have the Nolan Center for Justice. That model worked. We worked with Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we even worked with like Van Jones, for example, Kim Kardashian. And then, which she's really little, she's like this big. You can ask me about Kanye West later, but that's a little more controversial. But then we decided on the Center for Human Trafficking to develop that similar model where we would bring Democrats on board, work with the more liberal groups to get stuff done. Why? Because in today's environment, we're so divided. And the country you are inheriting, when I tell you you have to be the bravest of warriors, you have to be the bravest of warriors. You cannot be weak. You have to be strong. Because the persecution for conservative women, very real. The leftist machine, their goal is to push propaganda to create so much confusion when it comes to gender ideology, when it comes to basically destroying religion, and you guys are inheriting this. And so, you know, when I'm in the nursing home and I don't remember anybody's name, you guys can come visit me if you want, just bring me a good bottle of champagne. You guys are it. You're the generation who saves America. I'm doing the best I can, but my time, I do have gray hair, but it's hidden right now. But my time is close to up, but your time is now. Your time is now. And the battles are fierce, and the battles are big. And you have to realize that if we don't get down on our knees every single day and say, Lord, use me as your instrument every single day, this country will end. This country will cease to exist. And across the globe, they're looking at us right now, because we do CPACs across the globe, CPAC Israel, CPAC Australia, CPAC Japan, CPAC Hungary. They look at us and they're saying, if America falls, the world falls. Who takes over? The Chinese communists, the Russians. And that's why it's so, and we saw it in my father's case in Cuba, where he never thought in a million years that his whole life would come crashing down and that he had to move and come to the United States and raise his family here. But you ask my father, are you Cuban American? And he goes, nope, I'm American. He loves America so much, and he looks to his daughter and to his granddaughters for us to make sure that we preserve this great country. And we have to support candidates that do that as well. Like we have to support policies that do that as well. And so that is very critical as you guys are going through this process on recognizing that these threats of socialism are real in America, and that we can lose our freedoms very quickly, and that to find solutions, go listen to people. Go listen to people in the homeless shelter. Go listen to people in the prisons. I mean, we did a CPAC prison with 150 prisoners, male prisoners. I want to do one in a women's prisoners because they don't get resources like the male prisoners do. Go listen to the children. Because the congressmen and the senators and all these Washingtonians and these media elites that try to tell you how you should vote or how you should think, they are out of touch and they are wrong. Call your grandmother, call your aunt, call your cool sister with the blue hair, call them and ask them, what do you think? And then help them understand what we're dealing with. My husband, who went to Hong Kong to go protest with the Hong Kong protesters back in the day, a couple years ago, he was with these young people, and he told me, he goes, I was so surprised that it was so many young people, but it was the old people too, it was multi-generational. And the young people looked at my husband, and I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of my husband. He has like big white hair, and he's kind of a big guy. And they kept looking at him. They're like, "Sir, the police are going to shoot, so you better run fast." And they would look at him with a weird look, and he's like, "Okay, I got it." He goes, "We're worried you can't run fast." So he does move out of the area. He asks these young people. He says, "Why? Why are you protesting?" And they said, "Because our time is up. The freedoms are going to be gone. And we look to America to make sure that you guys stay strong." And actually, they were looking to Trump because they knew that Trump was very strong against China. And so that has to be the wake-up call, which is we are the ones that have to keep speaking up. Every time they come to say, "Oh, because your values," or, "Oh, you're taking away, reproductive rights." No, we stand for the babies. We celebrate the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We're going to continue pushing life pregnancy centers and life as being the right choice for women. And that's how we have to sell it. Positive messaging, messaging of hope, not messaging of destruction. Because the leftists spend their time, and I want you guys to observe this. I read all types of news. They spend their time, you go to ProPublica, they spend their time trying to take Clarence Thomas out of the Supreme Court. That is what they do every single day. They have a whole marketing and money campaign around it. They spend more money on all these campaigns to try to get him out because they want to be able to put a Biden appointee in there. So they want him out. And so you have to understand, for the Democrats, and I'm not going to say the Democrats because there's some good moderate Democrats, but few, but some. But for the leftists, their agenda is very much set, which is that to take down anything that is conservative, traditional, God, take down gender. They don't want gender to be a problem. And we have to not only stop it, but push the messages in order to make sure that we move it in the right direction for others as well. But I want to see if we can open up for questions, if that's okay. I think that's even more fun. Okay, go ahead. Tell me your name. You're right here. Your name and where you're from.
My name is Ava.
Ava, that's my number 4. And she's the nicest one out of all the kids.
Sorry, I just have one quick question.
Yeah.
Is your daughter Viana?
Yes.
I went to visitation.
No way.
Sorry.
What year did you graduate?
I was 22.
So V was 21, right?
Yeah.
And then Kat was 23. She just graduated.
Yep. Yeah.
That is so great. So what are you doing now?
We're both interns for Congressman Mike Gallagher.
Great guy.
Yeah, so a lot of focus on China and the CCP and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I was wondering, I'm going to sound like a reporter for a second, but I was wondering, I know that your father's experience in Cuba has definitely shaped your views on communism and socialism. I was wondering if you had any thoughts regarding America's strategy in terms of competing with China and the CCP.
Yeah. So I would recommend that if you really are interested in China, I know you people do Instagram, but for the old people that do Twitter is where you get the news. I mean, you can get the news on Instagram, don't get me wrong. But Twitter, and I like Twitter better than whatever the Threads is because that's a copycat of Twitter, and I like Elon Musk. Follow Gordon Chang, he's a CPAC board member. He is a champion in anything China. And, I think I think we have to understand what China's plan is. So China's spending their money and investing money not only in Africa, but in Latin America as well. So they're taking a foothold in all these different strategic places. They're doing this in Venezuela and in Cuba. So for example, they're spying from Cuba into the United States. We obviously saw the Chinese spy balloon. So look, I think we want to say we can't trade with them, but I think what President Trump did and his trade team is that their goal was fair reciprocal trading. Because right now it's so beneficial to China and not to the United States, for example, farmers. So the goal was, the president was very unafraid of tariffs, and he would put tariffs where needed in China. And, I think the key is that if you're going to be a trading partner, it's got to benefit both sides as much as possible. And we have to protect American workers, first and foremost. Secondly, from a military standpoint, China is advancing very quickly in terms of their technology. And we're too busy in the Pentagon dealing with misgendering and diversity, equity, and inclusion. That has to stop. We got to focus on making sure that we're investing in our military to be able to combat the almost likely attack of China on Taiwan, destabilizing the region, and possibly even going into Japan, which then opens us up to World War III. So we have very real, there are these realities, and I know that they're hard realities, but the mere fact we have such a weak president right now is very troubling, very concerning, and we all agree that it's a big challenge for America. We're in a very weakened position.
Hi, thank you so much for coming here to speak. My name's Alexa, and I go to Southern Methodist University, and I'm actually the president this coming year of our club called Liberty in North Korea, LINK, and we have clubs all across the U.S. on different college campuses, and I was just wondering what advice you would have for me and, I guess, messaging going forward at my school and how I can persuade and get other people to be more interested in supporting democratic values and this serious issue of communism.
Yeah, well, I mean, and talk about North Korea, the labor camps, the fact that it is, we get no transparency into North Korea at all. Like, this. I think bringing even speakers of people who have lived through communism, I always believe is probably, and you probably do that already, but I think people don't I worry, and maybe because I'm a mother and I'm a mother of 2 teenage kids and a 20-year-old and then some younger kids. I worry that your generation is so into this. I can't even tell you, if you're on TikTok, get off of it. TikTok is the worst. Chinese have all your data. It's horrible. So the key is that, you guys live in this world. So it's how do you get it to a point where, obviously the Chinese are pushing propaganda and misinformation through our social media channels constantly and making people aware of, guys, stop living in your phones, which I'm guilty of it too, and realize that there are Chinese nationals coming through our borders every single day. So that's an issue like in Texas that people totally can connect with, right? So I think it's bringing up those points of saying, do you know, Chinese nationals are coming through the border? Okay, that's a problem, you know what I mean? And then mentioning, obviously, that when you look at a communist system versus a capitalist system, more people have died in poverty and famine because of communism. I mean, so I think just by the facts alone, we win the arguments. But I almost find people just are unfamiliar with communism or even with propaganda. I think propaganda, there's a book called The Weaponization of Loneliness, which I highly recommend. Okay, you're gonna watch a movie, this is your homework. You're gonna watch Sound of Freedom, and then you're gonna buy this book, The Weaponization of Loneliness. And it talks about how in these different revolutions, so French Revolution, the Lenin Revolution, you go back to all these revolutions, it's all the same thing. They try to divide the children from their families, so the government can own the children, and then they spend so much time on the propaganda piece to make these children who tell on their parents, this happened during Lenin's time, as heroes. They make the children heroes. And so they obviously, it is so much about government control that it's I think just incredibly damaging. But that's a great book to read to really get great facts on the communism situation. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. My name is Heike, and I go to Baylor University in Waco, Texas. You emphasize and you focus a lot on your family and building that and preserving that. And as someone who's hoping to have a family someday, how do you, and what do you look for when you intentionally date, especially in DC, a city that where it could get a little crazy? What do you look for? How did you know your husband was the one to marry? And where do you look, especially in
Get out of DC as quickly. Oh, sorry. No, I didn't say that. Sorry. No, great question. I always this is the advice I give to my own daughters, and since it's courage, my daughters, I'm telling you, the most important decision if God is calling you in the vocation of marriage, again, I have friends who are single that never got married. If God is calling you for marriage, the most important, the person you pick is the most important decision you will make in your life. I can't emphasize that enough. And there's qualifications. And it was funny, my sweet Lucia, who is hysterical. She's the one that, she's now 11, but at 9 years old, she was doing her vocabulary quiz, and up at the top she'd write "Go Trump," and I was like, can we not? Like, no. And then she'd be like, Mom, I was talking to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth, like, she's gonna vote for Biden, and I told her, Biden kills the babies in the belly. So this is my, like, 9-year-old at the time. Now at 11, we were together the other day, and she goes to me, Mom, the world's gone crazy. How am I ever gonna find a man? And I was like, you're freaking 11 years old. Like, you don't have to worry about this right now. But it is, and I worry with our culture. You might think I'm a worrywart, which is probably true. I worry with our culture right now is that they've tried to, like, feminize the men. Like, they don't let men be men. Like, be men, like, provide, be the providers, be the hunters. Like, come on. And so for me with Matt, it was, he was so cute. He always had white hair since I met him. So I was like, okay, he's got to be much older than me, but he's only 5 years old. And then he was wearing this great suit with cowboy boots. And I was like, he must be from Texas. No, he's from Kansas. But one of the things that really worked for us, it was really faith. Like, we go to church every Sunday. In fact, now we go to daily mass, and now we do the daily rosary together for as a Catholic. So the faith is critical. The guy better go to church every week. And you got to take your kids to church every week, or do Bible study, or do what that you're talking about God every single day. And then, the second thing I say, he's like smarter than I am. So I'm like, look for someone smarter than you too, because it always helps, because then you're like, oh, I learned something new. And make sure he has a sense of humor. I laugh all the time with Matt. Even at 21 years, we're always like laughing together. And so, he just has a great sense of humor, and we connect. And then obviously knowing, like, if you have an inkling that this is not a right fit, just drop them. Don't even keep going. Just drop them. DC is tough. But there's got to be, like, Christian, Catholic, young Republican groups. Is there? I don't know. What do you think? No? I know there's, like, the online stuff, but I don't really know how that goes either. So that's not my category that I can tell you, but I can tell you the characteristics. Like, in my case, it's Christian or faith, someone of faith, faith, that faith is the center of their lives. Faith, like the fact that they're conservative and have conservative values that they share, and that they're supportive and loving of you. Like, I shared the story, like, when I had this opportunity, Matt was like, I back you up. Like, he has to be pro-woman, like pro-wife, you know what I mean? Because you have to be, as they say, equally yoked, right? Like, one shouldn't be higher than the other. You shouldn't be carrying his weight. Now, there are times that you're going to need to support him, and you have to support him all the time, but it has to be equally yoked. Does that help? Okay, thank God. That was a hard one. Okay, let's go back to policy. No, I'm kidding. Go. You guys keep me track on time. Okay.
My name's Kate. I go to Marquette University in Wisconsin.
Love Wisconsin.
I work for Rep. John James.
Great guy. Love John. He's great.
I was wondering if there is still room for bipartisan working together with the other side. It always seems like it's one or the other, and there's no in between.
Yeah, I don't love it. I'm going to be honest with you. Well, I really believe human trafficking. We did it with criminal justice reform under Trump, and my prayer is that human trafficking becomes that next issue, the sex trafficking issue, where I think we can find common ground with the Democrats. I have to be honest with you, I don't think there's a lot of common ground anymore. I think that with 24-hour media cycles, and these guys are trying to have the sound bite and social media, and, like Jim Banks, who I have great respect for, he talked about, well, impeach Joe Biden. And so I was asked this morning on Newsmax, they asked me, well, what do you think about impeaching Joe Biden? I'm like, I think it's harmful. Like, it's going to give Joe Biden, like, all the Democrats are going to be like, Joe Biden is a victim. We can't impeach. It creates further division. It's not going to solve the problem. Now, do you want to impeach Merrick Garland? Go right ahead. You know what I mean? Like, that makes more sense to me right now than going straight after Joe Biden. We saw this during Trump. When they went after Trump on the impeachment, it destroyed so much that we were working on. So I'll give you an example. I was at the White House, and Nancy Pelosi had just declared that she was going to proceed with the impeachment, the proceedings. And so she walks into the White House, and, the president, we had told the president, Speaker Pelosi, they're moving forward with the impeachment, the articles of impeachment, and he goes, just watch what I'm going to do. And I was like, okay. And let me tell you something. President Trump came to DC, and I remember when we would talk to him about Nancy Pelosi at the beginning, he's like, don't attack her. She's a friend. I've given her money on the campaign. Don't attack Nancy. But when they went after him on impeachment, he had enough. So she walks in, she's with the Democrats. We're all in the, what room was that? The cabinet room. And so we're sitting there, and he walks in and he goes, because we were talking about infrastructure. We had to talk about bipartisanship. We had a chance to get that done. And we did get infrastructure done under Biden. He walks in and he's like, Nancy's like, well, Mr. President, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about infrastructure. He goes, Nancy, you're going after me, so I'm not going to work with you anymore. And so he walks out of the room, and we're all like, oh. And then she's like, well, I mean, seriously, he's so silly. I was like, dude, man, you're going after him. You're trying to get him out of office. Now they're trying to throw him into jail. That's the narrative. The narrative is now, no, we either have to throw him into jail, and I'm very concerned for him because it just doesn't stop with the Democrats. When they get it on someone, it's like, I've never seen any political figure go through so much as Donald Trump. I've never in my life. The fact that the Democrats, their whole focus is the destruction of that man and his family. Never in my life. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. But as Donald Trump says, they'll go after Donald Trump. Let's even say Ron DeSantis or this other, any Republican pops up, they're going to go after them too. This is what they do. And Republicans are like, okay, we can get through this, and it's a tough time in DC, tough time. 5 more minutes. Sorry, I feel very chatty. This is like my therapy today. Okay, yeah.
I love it. All right,
Okay,
my
good.
name is Macy. I go to Brigham Young University,
Great.
and I'm in Senator Kramer's office this summer.
Great.
I was just wondering, what role Spanish has played in your profession, because that was mentioned a little
Right.
bit. And then, do you recommend learning languages, multiple languages? What?
You could do the reverse. Just get like a Hispanic boyfriend. It'll be perfect. I love Spanish because I get to talk, and then my husband has no idea what I'm talking about, so it's really great. And then when I'm talking to my mother, I'm like on the phone, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And he'll look at me, Matt will look at me and be like, why are you fighting with your mother? I'm like, I'm not fighting. This is how we talk. It's a lot of drama. So yes, if you can learn a language, I think it's fantastic. I think for me in my career, I've obviously been able to do Spanish language television, and I find it's a great way to connect with the community. So I love, for example, in CPAC Mexico, I was able to communicate with the girls that were there and just be engaged at that level as well. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. When we did CPAC Brazil, I was like, I know Spanish. This is like Portuguese. It'll be great. I didn't understand a word they were saying. The only thing I understood is that they would go, blah, 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 in Portuguese, and they'd go, fake news! And then everyone would stand up and be like, So yes, they have fake news in Brazil too. So that's, I think, I highly, if you can, definitely Spanish. Even at this point, like Mandarin is good to learn too, but I think it's super helpful. And for me, I was really able to engage when it came to the outreach for the campaign, and even at the White House as well.
All right, we have time for one more question.
One more question and a cookie. That is what I'm gonna get. And then when you get to my age, you really can't have cookies because then you're like, what happened, man? It's bad, too much sugar.
I'm Nicole again.
Hi, Nicole.
So you talked about working with Democrats or liberals on certain issues, and then talking about the human trafficking issue. I'm sure you've seen all the backlash from the left on Son of Freedom,
Yeah.
things connected to a conspiracy. So
Right.
some people are just so evil, I don't think it's even worth the effort kind of talking with them.
Mhm.
But what about the people who are in the middle or don't really pay attention to politics much and just see the kind of the propaganda from the left? How do we convince them how serious the issue is?
Right.
How do we get them away from that propaganda?
Well, I really think, I would say, go with me to see The Sound of Freedom. I think The Sound of Freedom does a beautiful job a realistic job of what is going on. No, I don't think people understand how horrific the situation is. When you have little girls and boys being taken away from their families at 6 and 7 years old, and then being sent to the USA, which is a top destination for sex trafficking, and they're raped multiple times a day, that's not acceptable. That is simply, no, it's got to stop. And if we can't save our children, and this goes with the gender issue as well, we won't have a civilization. Like we can't survive if we cannot defend the most vulnerable of our families and of the family, of the children. So I feel like children is one of those uniting factors. I know that for the Democrats, they don't think the baby in the womb is a baby, but like the children, like we need to say, like that has to be part of humanity. It's part of our obligation to do that. So I do feel like Sound of Freedom is a great way to do that, as well, to have that conversation with them, to say, come with me, let's just go see the movie together. I will say, I had a conversation with Mira Sorvino. She's in the movie, she's an actress in the movie. And we're doing a summit this week. It's actually up on the Hill on Thursday. It's the International Summit Against Human Trafficking. Mira was gonna come speak. And so I was really excited. So we get on the phone with her and she's like, well, I'm a progressive. And I was like, okay, great. And then she's like, and I noticed that you're having Marsha Blackburn speak. And I was like, yeah, she's a senator. She has a piece of legislation. She goes, well, we need Democrats to come. And I was like, invite whoever you want that's a Democrat. They can definitely come. Have them come. I'd love for them to be part of this. She couldn't find one. And so, so it made me annoyed because she was like, oh, because you guys are CPAC and you're conservative. And I was like, yeah, but I explained to her, I go, for me, I don't view this politically. Like, I really believe we can bring both parties together on this, and we're going to work with liberal groups to get this done. And so I think she ended up backing out of the summit because she's like, the QAnon and I was like, dude, I reject QAnon. I don't even know what it is. Like, we're not in there. Like, no, like, this is a narrative from the left. Like, when those articles came out, I think in Rolling Stone or something about the movie and QAnon and far right, I was like, no. It is, go see these children, and you'll see that it's like, we have an obligation to save them. We have an obligation to stop this billion-dollar industry, and we got to start here in the U.S. because this is a big problem that we're seeing in the U.S. And, as women, we all have to be that voice. And you guys have been given these incredible talents to find your issue, whether it's, China, North Korea, sex trafficking, the gender issue. There's so many issues, and find the one that you love and go after it and figure out the solutions and bring those people along that are kind of stuck. Send them an article here and there. And see if you can bring them along. My sister, who is not political, she's blonde and super cute, 7 years younger than I am, never was involved in politics. And then when Donald Trump came to the scene, became really active on the political front. And she's so funny. Now she reads more politics than I do. My only advice, and this is my prediction, and I'll end with this, is that figure out what the 2024 thing will be that will interrupt the election. It will either be A, UFOs and aliens, B, another virus, or, God only, all I know is like, you're going to laugh if next year, I hope not laugh, but you'll be like, I remember when Mercedes said UFOs. And then it was like something crazy, because you start reading the news and you're like, I can't believe we're even talking about UFOs. This is how crazy it's all become. But you all are the beacons of hope and the bright lights and all of this. So I'll keep you all in my prayers today, and want to offer my day for you all. And God bless you all. And thank you for being here and being part of this great program.